if you're working from your past, if you're sort of, here's my beliefs and my identity and who I think I am, it limits your possibilities. And if you have let go of your past, let go of your identity and your beliefs, even just for a moment, the possibilities for your future are become infinite.
So do you like adventure? How about self-development and pushing yourself to overcome obstacles and showing up better in life? I know I do, and I know today's guest does as well. So welcome to the True Man Podcast, Derek Loudermilk. Derek is the founder of Adventure Quest. He's an adventure author and lifestyle entrepreneur, all of which sound extremely interesting to me. Derek is also host of the podcast, Art of Adventure. Derek, welcome to the True Man Podcast today.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we got to dive into this adventure thing. But before we do, and life's an adventure, as you're well aware. And so I was just telling you, I was looking at your website, and one of the first things that stood out to me was this story that's on your website that began to evolve back in 2014. And I'm sure you can look back on it now and go, wow, that was a real pivot point in my life. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what was going on in your life back then, so that it sets up where you are now, I'm sure.
Yeah. There was a moment when I sort of took stock of my life, and I sort of realized that I had lost all of the scripts that were running my life. And what I mean by that is what I thought I was going to be had fallen away. So I had just gotten divorced. I was married for about a year. I had a traumatic brain injury, which sort of led me to drop out of my PhD program. I was always going to be a scientist. I thought I'd be a professor. So, and then my house got flooded in a sort of a freak flood in the high desert in Colorado. And, you never expect that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's about as freaky as it gets when you're in a desert.
Yeah,
it was. A lot of people don't realize Colorado's mostly desert, but
it was crazy. And there was so much water in the parking lot so I lived in this condo area. Luckily I wasn't there at the time, but just the water buildup from the parking lot flooded the condo up to, the kitchen counter level. And so, basically all the trajectories in my life that I had planned on were wiped out within a year. And so there was this moment when I found myself just alone on the other side of the world. I was living in the jungles in Bali at the time, and I really had no identity to speak of, which is really interesting to think of. I had always considered myself, I'm an athlete or a scientist or this, I'm in a relationship, and these were the aspects of my life that I sort of tied myself to.
Right.
And I was just, I drove my motorcycle to the beach, and I was just sitting there. I was like, I'm a man. Here I am on Earth, but I have really no identity other than I'm just who I am. And it's very freeing to have such an open possibility of, like, I can do anything that I want. I can make any choice that I want. It's a blank slate from here on out. And I was actually in that space for a few weeks of just being sort of a person without a history or a person without a trajectory.
What did that feel like?
For me, it felt very freeing, and very exciting, because a lot of these, why I'm calling them scripts, I had sort of picked up from, so the scientist one, my dad was a scientist. I sort of copied off him in a way. And then all of my teachers told me, you're great at this. You should totally be a scientist. And, I did great research, and I tried to make it as adventurous as possible. I did field research in Yellowstone. I was in the hot springs, and driving my snow machine in between herds of bison to get to my sample sites in the middle of the winter. And it was like as adventurous as I could make it. And it still wasn't totally right for me, but I was just going with it. And so many people take on these societal constraints, these projections of they take a test in high school and it says, oh, you should be a chef. Okay, great. And then I'm just going to be a chef, right?
Right.
When you strip all that away and you're left with just the freedom to be anything, it can be intimidating for sure.
Yeah.
But it allows you then to say, well, what have I learned about myself? What do I know is true for me in this moment? What would I really like to do next? And I spent a lot of time just saying like, that's not for me, or yeah, I want to do this. And that led to a lot of wild adventures and saying yes to random invitations to do things and go places, and creating quests for myself. I'm gonna one of my first quests was to travel for a month in New Zealand and spend no money. So I had to try to figure out how am I gonna travel for a month without spending any
How
money.
did that work out?
It worked really well. I ended up spending money on food, from time to time, but that was about it. Yeah.
I'm actually fascinated by this because I've had a lot of conversations around identity, because so much of the time, men, it's a couple of the questions that are commonly asked, right? I mean, you meet somebody and it's what's your name and then what do you do? And those become your two big identifiers. And so I've had this question quite a bit. And so what I'm fascinated by is like, you're coming at it from almost a different angle. Like, I didn't know what my identity was, but I wasn't tied to anything, which I'm like going, wow, what a fascinating way to be, because then it frees you up to go, what are the possibilities that exist? And this is a challenge that many men I talk to have, is they're stuck in their current identity and they can't create that space to have the freedom to maybe pivot and make that change, if that's a fair thing to say. So
yeah. And so here's an interesting, taking on different identities for different things. And so one example is I have a couple of young kids. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. And my 3-year-old daughter asked to be called Little Fox because there's a book she read, which is like Bedtime for Little Fox or something like that. And she was like, right now I'm identifying like Little Fox, so please refer to me as that. And okay, we'll see how that goes. But it's really interesting, like obviously she's not, her totality of who she is not Little Fox, but she's taking on this identity in this month to be that. And so I have, like, you introduced me as an adventurer, that's part of my identity, that's just kind of a flavor that I approach everything with. So I have, in some ways, when I'm approaching different entrepreneurial projects or travel or whatever, like I put on, the identity of an adventurer, which has me move towards challenges. It has me being okay with being a beginner. It has me being comfortable with thrust into new situations and meeting people for the first time and all these things. And then from that identity, what I actually do, how I carry myself, and the steps that I take sort of flow naturally. So I often think it's great to work from a beneficial identity. So if you're trying to run a business, or if you're trying to be a great partner, what is the most powerful and beneficial identity that enables you to actually go through life and do that.
Yeah. And wow, that's really deep stuff, man. But I think, and this is just something I've kind of come across. I didn't fully understand it really until the last couple of years, is the whole idea of adventure and how that can free up this whole identity thing. Because I think I've come to appreciate what an adventure looks like now in my life more than ever. Because I feel like I've been on one for the last year, which in some respects is really cool. But I guess that leads me to ask you, why do some people just kind of sit and spin and choose not to go on an adventure when at least what I have found, it's like really opened my mind to possibilities as a result of just kind of going on these adventures and intentionally calling things an adventure. Why do you think some people avoid that um, and choose not to go on that
Yeah,
adventure and kind of sit and spin?
I think they may believe that there's something unknown that's too uncomfortable for them to feel. Like there's an experience that they might have, which they're just not willing to, feel that, whether that's fear or uncertainty or physical discomfort or whatever it is. And whatever you're unwilling to experience limits your life in a way. So if you can reduce the things that you're unwilling to feel, right? If you're willing to feel deep sadness or feel what it's like to really screw things up, and then clean them up, if you're willing to be embarrassed or willing to be exhausted and at the end of your rope, all of these things are things that people avoid because they're so uncomfortable. And an adventurer, embraces the discomfort, because as you move through discomfort, you also gain new experiences that you never would. You learn about yourself in ways that you never could otherwise, and it changes you, right? It helps you evolve your identity, it helps you understand. And so when I look at people in my own life that are stuck, or they're prioritizing comfort, right? They feel that comfort or certainty or sameness is they're so at home, even if the sameness is like you have the same argument with your partner, or the
Right. They're
sameness
just
of,
they flat out are comfortable.
yeah. And so comfort is the enemy in a lot of ways. And so I had a cycling mentor who was telling me, when you're at your most uncomfortable, and we were in Spain. I lived in southern Spain at the time. He's ex-professional from Canada, and we were climbing these steep mountains and really riding on our limit. 99% effort, and just the pain and the burning of the body. And he said, okay, this is the moment. Like, this is going to make the difference in the races. If you can feel at home in this discomfort, that's going to be a huge advantage, because everyone's going to be uncomfortable at the same time, right? The hardest point of the race is when you can win the race. So when you're at home in the discomfort, when you embrace it, that's how you can win. And that's ultimately, I would practice spending time in this place of discomfort so that it didn't bother me. And that's what enabled me to win some races.
It's interesting. Now you work with other people. How do you translate that and help people achieve that? Because this is a challenge that a lot of us have, is just well, we want everything to be comfortable, right? But that's just kind of not how life works for the most part. So how do you transfer that to others? You've been through it. How do you help them kind of gain that knowledge?
Yeah, well, after you establish the identity that they're working from, of now I'm a person that embraces challenge. I'm a person that moves toward discomfort if it's going to be beneficial for me. Then you can have some fun. You can design fun practices for people to push their comfort zone, right? So whatever comfort zone it is, if it's public speaking or marketing on social media, or having difficult conversations, whatever that comfort zone is, you find fun little ways to push it out a little bit, because if you take a huge step, you're just going to bail probably. So you want to take a step
Right.
that's reasonably challenging, right? So if it's in conversation with your partner, it may simply be saying like, I would really like it if you'd scratch my head. I could really use that right now. And just simply, sometimes that's could be the edge of your comfort zone, right? And you really just want to be supported in some way that you just were afraid to ask for. And a lot of times, even if you don't expect somebody to say yes, you might get a yes anyway. So at one point I did these challenges for myself called unreasonable requests. So
I think I'm going to enjoy hearing about this. All right.
Whenever I would just expect to get a no, I would force myself to ask for it anyway. So this, part of the traveling around New Zealand for free was to just keep asking for, I asked the New Zealand train service, the national sort of scenic railways, to have a free train pass, and they gave it to me. I said, whatever you would like in exchange, I'm happy to write a blog post or do a podcast or something. But they gave me a free rail pass, so that was amazing. So that helped me with the travel around the country. I asked for lots of introductions to people. I said, who knows someone that can host me for free in these different parts of the country? And people would just volunteer. Oh, I'll introduce you to my parents. And, so it was actually really cold when I was there, because it's, the opposite hemisphere. And I wasn't prepared. All I had was my sort of tropical clothes. And so I was staying with my friend's parents, and I said, I'm really cold. Can I have some warm weather clothes? And he ended up just giving me some of his old clothes, because we were the same size, right? And so another one of these examples of unreasonable requests was, it was my birthday, and I was living in Bali in Indonesia, and there was this monthly party that they used to have, these big house parties with like 300 people and a DJ and a pool in some mansion in some villa. And I said, I want you to throw this party for me next month for my birthday, and I would like, for my birthday present, half of the proceeds to go to this local charity. And the organizer looked at me and he was like, all right, let's try it, let's do it. And so it ended up being the biggest birthday I've ever had, 300 people, this huge mansion. And it was like, hey, everyone, it's, this special event for Derek's birthday. And most people I had never met before, but it was super cool. And we raised millions of rupiah, which is thousands of dollars, for this charity. And it was, one of my most memorable birthdays. But it never would have happened if I wouldn't have just asked for it.
Yeah. What's your takeaway from all that? I read a book. I can't think of the author now. The book doesn't come to me, where he went around and I think, was it like 100 no's? He was just going to, he would ask kind of the same thing, all these unreasonable questions, really trying to intentionally hear the word no so that he could become kind of immune from it. It didn't bother him. So
Yeah.
what was your takeaway from these requests, unreasonable requests?
Well, I've found that the universe really supports people who ask, with a clear question and a clear intent behind something. And the clearer question you ask, and this can include, like, if you're praying or meditating on some question, and you sort of put it out to the universe, like, I would like some guidance, or I would like some money, or I would like, whatever to come to me. If you have, a strong foundation about why you're doing it, and you can be clear specifically about the type of I don't know, guidance that you're looking for, you'll get an answer, you know. And tell me exactly again, what was your question?
Well, I was basically like, what did you, you know, what was your takeaway from asking these unreasonable requests?
Well, and then also, you know, if you ask it of somebody else, then how they respond, right, is out of your hands. So, you know, this in sales, for example, right, you can say, you know, would you like to buy this? And then it's their choice, right? Yes or no. And so, but they're equal in terms of, you know, it's their choice, but you've asked the question, you've opened the door to that possibility by asking the question. You know, would you like to go on this adventure with me? And then they get to choose.
Right.
So that's, you know, that's where their free will comes in, but your free will comes in the asking of it.
Yeah, you know, I've told people this conversation I've had recently where I've said, you know, growing up, I was a little bit more introverted, so I didn't ask a lot of questions out of fear that people might think I was stupid, which is kind of interesting because now I do a podcast where if you don't ask questions, you don't get a you know, a response. But it's actually been a very you know, I've overcome, you know, a lot of that stuff from my younger years. But I think I'm more fascinated now to ask these questions just overall in my life, because what I'm finding is that when I do, to your point, the universe responds accordingly. And I've been blown away by it, specifically over the last 5 or 6 months now, as we've gotten some consistency with the podcast and I'm meeting just a broad range of people online. And I'm always blown away that, and maybe I shouldn't be, people typically positively respond. And I think so much of the time we don't ask questions because we're afraid of the answer. And what has been incredible to me is, and maybe it's my take on the world, I don't know. Tell me what you think, but I'm just blown away at how incredibly responsive people are. Even if you get a no, it's not like necessarily a no, get out of here, you know, type thing. It you know, it comes across in a very positive way. Was that kind of your experience as well as you were going through this?
Yeah, and sometimes you won't get your request granted in the way that you expect. Yeah, and
right.
a lot of times we ask with an assumption of how things are going to play out, because that's just our frame of knowledge. So right now we are shopping for a farm. We're gonna buy a farm and do regenerative farming and build a little community on some land. And there's this property that we're going to look at, but they said, oh, you have to have your full sort of funding ready before you can even see the property. And I was like, well, that's kind of a catch-22, because we're getting investors and we'll show them the land that we have in order to sort of lure in the investors.
Right.
Okay, so I asked my realtor, I said, can you get us onto this land somehow? Can you know, without this, or can we have some sort of temporary letter? And she just came up with the solution. She said, I vouch for them, you know, they can manage it. And the other realtor said, okay, great. So I didn't know she was just going to come up with, you know, sort of personal, like, I'm vouching for them because I know them. This has happened to be my next door neighbor growing up, so she does know me. But she just made it happen, right? I just put out, here's what I want. Here's what I'm asking for.
Yeah.
It's just to be able to see this. And then she used her own creativity or judgment to figure it out.
Do you feel like being open to asking these questions has helped your confidence as a person to just more readily ask people for something?
Yeah. And, you know, I've experienced, right? If I'm hitchhiking across the country, or if I'm, we did motorbiking. We biked the length of Vietnam on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and a lot of times you go to this village, right? You might not even speak the language, or it's just full of strangers, right? You don't know anybody there, and you have to find a place to stay, a place to eat, someone to fix your motorcycle, whatever it is, and you have no choice but to form a quick relationship with somebody, and then enlist them in helping you. And so if you don't ask, well, then you're out of luck, right? And so it forced me in a lot of ways to learn how to sort of quickly get people to like me, and befriend people quickly. And there's a few aspects of confidence there. There's also the physical confidence that I had was the strength of my own body to carry on day to day, the strength of my creativity to just figure out a solution on the fly, my ability to sort of know that I can just engage with anyone anywhere in the world, and have it go well. There's a lot of different aspects that I picked up along the way, that just pretty much any situation I'm in now, I just kind of trust that I'll do a good job, that I'll show up and make it work.
I was joking with Derek before the podcast started, because I noticed he's gone around the world. I said, man, you're like the Dos Equis guy. You're like the most interesting guy in the world. I mean, he's riding a bike, he's on a motorcycle, he's in all these different countries. I mean, it's just, they're fun stories to listen to, actually. I mean, how do you feel like that's rounded you out to be the professional you are now? I mean, those experiences are amazing.
Well, another aspect of adventure, right, is it's actually in the dictionary definition of adventure, an interesting or remarkable experience. And remarkable means it's worth remarking about, worth telling a story about.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of times when you get into sticky situations or uncomfortable stuff, it's not worth telling a story about. And so some of these stories, because they have this element of either they're actually risky physically, or you just feel they're risky because it's uncomfortable, because it's new. So there's this element of risk, this element of change, your identity shifts, or your perspective of yourself, and then there's a story. And what's really interesting is someone was talking to me about how time seems to change as you age, like the years go by faster, and I think partly that has to do with novelty, right? If you're experiencing more routine and less new experiences, it seems like your life is just flying by. When you're prioritizing seeking new experiences, right, you have a bias towards novelty, then it seems to slow down time, right? Because kids are experiencing new things all the time, because it's the first time they've ever written a letter,
Right.
the first time they've ever gone to school. And so pretty much every day I'm trying to do something again for the first time.
I can appreciate that. I mean, this podcast for me was something that took off. It's been an adventure since the minute I started it. Somebody was asking me the other day about it, and I think they were more referring to themselves as like, well, what kind of guest was I? And I'm like, I'm sure you can appreciate this because you have a podcast. I'm like, every podcast has its own personality. It's like birthing another child, right? It's completely different in and of itself. I treat it as an adventure, because it's pushing me. It's exciting. It's somewhat competitive, and I was involved in athletics. I'm sure you take from your biking a competitive kind of spirit to all this, and I mean, I love the competitiveness of trying to do something better today than I did it yesterday. And to me, that's part of the adventure I'm on. Actually, I find as a result, it makes my days go fast because I'm enjoying them.
Yeah, in the moment, you're just in that flow state where
Yeah.
you're rising to meet the new challenge. And physical sports and training is such a great teaching tool, because
Mhm.
you learn where, okay, I'm not good enough to do this skill yet, or if I'm playing one-on-one against someone, they're beating me in this one aspect, they're jumping higher than me, and you see very directly, like, oh, I could train my jumping skill, and then I could actually match this person and rise to the occasion. Sometimes it's a little harder to uncover, like, what skill you could train in order to, if it's podcasting, or if it's in your relationship, or if it's in parenting or sales or whatever. Sometimes it's a little harder to tease, like, what is the skill that I want to practice
Yeah.
to progress, right?
Mhm.
um, but that, if you can sort of dismantle and deconstruct the pieces of, okay, podcasting, right? There's your voice, there's the promotion of it, there's the booking of the guests, there's the flow of the interview, there's the questions you ask. Each one is its own separate skill. Well, which skill do I think would be the best for me to try to improve? And then how, what does it look like to improve a little bit? What is the quest or the challenge that I could play with myself? So let's say it's our voice, right? I could practice singing a lot more. I could speak with different accents. I
Yeah.
could, um, I could deepen or raise my voice and play around with my tone. There's so many different subtle bits um, that you might not even use, right? You might just end up speaking in your normal speaking voice. But if you've played around with all these other things, then you can pick and choose what to add.
Yeah. No, it's really true. Um, Listen, I tell you, before we wrap up today, there was like so much I wanted to touch on, and we kind of went down a road, and that's kind of what happens when you're podcasting and enjoying a conversation. But before we close out here, I just you've got such a diverse background in anything, and so I just wanted to ask you: was there anything that you wanted to touch on today that you may want the True Man audience to know about? And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, make tell everybody how they can find you and get a hold of you, and I'll put all that in the show notes, of course. But
Yeah, there's a lot of things we've already touched on, especially about working from a powerful identity. Um, Another thing that I might say is important is in that very beginning we talked about, when I had sort of had let go of my history or my scripts,
yeah,
um, and I was feeling the possibilities, right? It was like the possibilities were infinite, and that's a very powerful place to be, when you believe that anything is possible for you, when you are not limiting your future, right? And so there's almost this link between, if you're working from your past, if you're sort of, here's my beliefs and my identity and who I think I am, it limits your possibilities. And if you have let go of your past, let go of your identity and your beliefs, even just for a moment, the possibilities for your future are become infinite. So if you really want to do something new in the world, or if you want to succeed as an entrepreneur or a leader, it can help you to disconnect from your past, your history, in order to give you sort of greater infinite possibilities into the future.
yeah, that there's so much truth in that, and that's we self sabotage ourselves so much of the time. Get caught up in maybe an identity that we believe that may not necessarily be true, unfortunately. Derek, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and find you online and that type of thing.
Yeah. DerekLoudermilk.com is the website. And we actually ended up rebranding the Art of Adventure a couple a while back to the Derek Loudermilk show, bringing in more science and spirituality into the conversation. Traditionally, it's been about adventure and entrepreneurship. I'm super keen on the intersection of science and spirituality right now. So we do shows about that. And Derek Loudermilk is also on all the socials, Instagram, YouTube, and stuff like that. So
yeah, and we'll post
thank you.
that in the show notes for everyone. Derek, thanks for being on today. Appreciated you being here, and always love a good talk about adventure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
You bet. Take care.